I see. Secretary of State, last man standing, Michael Watson. Good morning, sir. How are you?
Good morning, Paul. I think I heard knock that payday in there, which makes me proud.
Yes, I had to get them all in here. I had to cut that into 3 different versions, so I give everybody equal time on it. All right, the polls are officially open, and we are ready to rock and roll. And here's what I say. Be a decision maker. It feels good. Go out, because the people who are going to vote today will definitely be decision makers.
That's exactly right, Paul. We've got about 65 counties in runoffs. I think about 6 legislative races included in there. But I think what speaks the most is people need to understand many of these runoffs are the local level. Your supervisors, your tax assessors, your chancery clerks, those are the ones that are going to impact your lives much more quickly than something at the federal level, because they're on the ground making decisions that impact you every day. So just remind folks to get out and vote. Too many people died and gave all they had for us to have that right. So we need to go out there and honor them with our votes and have our voices heard. Just because we get some questions on C Spire text line, if you voted in the last election, you have to vote in the same for the same party you voted in. If you voted Republican, this is a runoff. We are completing that process, so you have to vote the way you voted then, a Republican or a Democrat. If you didn't vote in the last election, but you want to vote in this one, in the runoff, you can do it either way? That's exactly right. If you did not vote in the first round, you could vote in the runoff in either of the runoff parties. We have any problems in the last one as far as the machines out there? Are we getting kind of standard across the state, or where are we with that with that structure? That's a really good question, Paul. And the legislature, thanks to them, gave us some funds for all the counties to get on the same page. Basically, by 2024, in the presidential election, all the counties will have these new paper verifiable trails. Many counties have already had that machine in place, and basically you fill out your ballot, you put it into an optical scanner, and then it counts. So at the end of the day, if there's any kind of questions about the machines, you always have that paper ballot to go back to, and I think that's an important piece to remember. So all 82 counties will be on that by 2024. Yeah. Are you pretty confident there's no way for that to be hacked into? I am. At the end of the day, it's paper. Well, I understand it, but when do you transmit the final totals back to the collection point via internet? Gotcha. Good question. With those funds, the legislature, basically, there are 2 things they have to have. Number 1, a paper verifiable trail. Number 2, incapable of connecting to the internet. So what happens, Paul, is when you go vote, you cast your ballot at those precincts. The data is collected there, so they're in thumb drives, if you want to call it that. They take it to Election Central at the county level, so it's usually at your courthouse. They compile that data, and then that's the first time that it hits the internet, and it's obviously an encrypted and safe connection there, and it sends the data up to the statewide election management system in Jackson. So that's the only time that information hits the internet. Well, are you double checking what the precinct reported to what is at the final collection point, what they're reporting? Yeah, that's another good question. You'll recall this legislative session, we've been asking for post-election audits for a couple of years now. Those got passed this year. So over the next 4 years, all 82 counties will be audited. So we'll be going and checking that number. Look, is the number that cast and signed up on the register there the same number of ballots and votes that were counted? Did the absentee process go correctly? Did the affidavit process go correctly? So I think that's another thing that we can return confidence to the process in Mississippi and say, look, we are doing this on the ground, making sure that people are following the law, and we're having a good, clean process. Michael Watson, who is the Secretary of State. Michael, when you start looking at the 2024 session and a new term, because you have no competition now, by the way, and I want to ask you, I do want to ask you about that. No, but is there something we need to change? I think we've made it as easy as possible for people to vote, to be honest with you. Oh, my goodness, Paul. We've helped to register over 240,000 Mississippians since we've been in office. If you look at the 2020 turnout, I continue to remind folks of that. In the face of COVID, in the face of everything else going on, that contentious election, we broke records in voter turnout. So not only are we turning out to the polls, but we're also making sure that we're registering new voters. I was a little bit disappointed with the turnout for the primaries, about 30%, which was roughly the lowest since 2007. And I think one of the reasons for that is, again, people are starting to kind of think, well, wait a minute, does my vote even count? And so I think that's the important thing that we did in the legislative sessions of returning the confidence to the electorate, that this process is clean, it's full of integrity, so the vote that you cast is the vote that's going to be counted.
Asked Mr. Watson if he heard anything about Tippah County running out of paper ballots. I used the last paper ballot at my precinct. There was 12 people waiting to vote, and they didn't have any ballots, Jim and Ripley.
Is that this morning, Paul, or was that last time?
I'm sorry?
Was that this morning or last time?
Oh, that was the last time.
Yeah. So there were a few counties or a few precincts, that did run out of ballots. They had to have more ballots brought to them. So that's something that happens. That's a local level decision. Those are where the commissioners have to decide how many ballots to print to have at each precinct. So again, there are going to be some errors from time to time, but they were quick to respond and get those ballots there for the folks that needed them. To
you as Secretary of State, on the Jaworski decision to resign, will his name still be on the ballot? What has to happen for his name not to be on the ballot?
Well, so the ballots are not prepared yet, Paul, so they will have time to make sure that he's not on the ballot. And one of the interesting things there is, because that was the race in which I'm involved, I removed myself from the process in the office, but I was recently made aware that we had sent him to notification that he needed provided proof for his residency. As you have probably heard, he voted in California in 2018 and 2020. So I think there were going to be some issues there. And it's unfortunate that he's had these health issues. And let me reiterate here, praying for Jaworski and hope all is well with him, and hope for a speedy recovery. But that's going to really raise some questions on whether or not the executive committee can replace him on the ballot, which typically, if somebody has to remove himself because of a health reason, an affidavit is sent to the SBEC, the State Board of Election Commissioners, that is then we vote to accept it or not. And if accepted, then the executive committee can name a substitute candidate for that position.
Is there a deadline on that? What is the deadline?
So once they figure out, as I understand it, from their committee chairman or their party chairman this week, I think he said they would be deciding this week. And once they submit that, the SBEC has 5 days to meet to accept, and then the process moves forward from there.
Who are these election commissioners? This has never happened. Has this happened before?
You know, I'm not sure, Paul. I'm sure it has happened before.
Yeah. Who appoints the election commissioners, and who are these people?
So the State Board of Election Commissioners, the governor, the attorney general, and the secretary of state. So those are the 3 members of the SBEC. I will remove myself from that decision. So that decision will be made by the other 2 members there. But that's who sits on the commission.
Are they going to do this based on just the request itself, or the candidate? And whoever the candidate is that's appointed didn't go through the election process at all, but their qualifications, his or her qualifications, certainly have to be met.
Absolutely. That's by statute. This whole operation of how this works in the process is in statute. So they will have the affidavit. I believe it also has to have a doctor's signature attached in some form or fashion to make sure that it isn't just an excuse. It is a medical issue, and the doctor has signed off on that. So once they get that proof, then they make their decision, and we'll go from there.
Michael, thank you, man. Appreciate it very much.
You're welcome, Paul. Have a good day, buddy.
Michael Watson, Secretary of State, and the polls are open till 7.